All right, good afternoon. I'll start off with a statement on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the entry into force of the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention. The Secretary General welcomes the 20th anniversary on March 1st of the entry into force of the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention, a convention that has saved countless lives, stopped mutilation and injury, and enabled the revitalization of neighborhoods. The Secretary General commends the commitment of the state's parties to rid the world of a weapon that kills and maims indiscriminately while seriously impeding the peace and development. He congratulates the 31 states who have declared their country to be mine-free and urges all states that have not done so to accede as soon as possible to the convention. The Secretary General has accelerated efforts to render anti-personnel mines a relic of the past. He also appeals to states to ensure access to sustainable assistance and services for thousands of mines victims. That statement is online. As you heard a bit earlier, Geir Peterson, the Secretary General Special Envoy for Syria, briefed the Security Council in an open meeting this morning and said it is essential to have a direct and effective engagement with governments of Syria and the opposition. He welcomed the readiness of the parties to work with him and said he believes that there is a shared sentiment that the battlefield developments may be winding down, although conflict is far from over. The Special Envoy said he senses a wide acceptance of the notion that convening a credible, balanced, inclusive, and viable Syrian-led and owned constitutional committee under UN auspices in Geneva can be an important revitalization of the political process. It can be a door opener to a deeper dialogue and genuine negotiations, he said. Mr. Peterson is expected to speak to you at the stakeout a bit later on, probably after the briefing. And earlier in the day, the Security Council extended the mandate of the UN Integrated Peacebuilding Office for Guinea-Bissau for 1 year until February 28th, 2020. And at 3 p.m. this afternoon, there will be an open meeting on Venezuela in the Security Council. This will be followed by an open meeting and consultations on Myanmar, in which Council members will be briefed by the Secretary General Special Envoy for Myanmar, Christine Schreiner-Burgener. And just to round up the Security Council items, yesterday the Council adopted Resolution 2457 in support of the Silencing the Guns Initiative, Africa Initiative of the African Union. The resolution represents substantial political backing from the Security Council to the top priorities of the African Union. Hold on 2 seconds. Don't go away, Fahan. Do not go away. Do not go away. Hold on. News as it happens. Where were we? Silencing the guns. We welcome the readiness of the Security Council to contribute to the African Union's effort to build on existing progress and achieve the goal of a conflict-free Africa towards the realization of Agenda 2063 and the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. The Secretary General looks forward to strengthening the strategic partnership with the African Union to further advance peace, security, and sustainable development in Africa. Staying in the continent, the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mark Lowcock, during a 3-day mission to Zimbabwe today announced the allocation of $10 million from the UN Central Emergency Response Fund to help reach more than 5.3 million people in need of humanitarian assistance in Zimbabwe following drought and number of economic shocks. Mr. Lowcock made the announcement during the launch of a flash appeal by the UN and the government today. The appeal requires $234 million to provide food, health, water, sanitation, hygiene, and protection support for 2.2 million people over the next 6 months. And in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, regarding the DRC, the Director General of the UN, of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, says he's deeply concerned following an arson attack last night on an Ebola treatment facilities managed with Doctors Without Borders in North Kivu. This is the second such attack in days. Last Sunday, another Ebola treatment facility in Katwa, also run by Doctors Without Borders, was partially burnt down. Following last night's attack, UN peacekeeping mission, the DRC, has reinforced security in the area. And turning to Nigeria, humanitarian colleagues report that at least 10,000 people reportedly returned to Nigeria's northeastern town of Ron from Cameroon yesterday. These civilians were among more than 40,000 Nigerian women, men, and children who originally fled Ron following the deadly attacks by non-state armed groups in December of 2018. According to our humanitarian colleagues, they say the reports indicate that hundreds more people en route to Ron from Cameroon, which is 8 kilometers away by foot. All of these people are in dire need of humanitarian assistance, including shelter, food, safe drinking water. International and national humanitarian organizations have not been able to return to Ron to provide the needed humanitarian assistance due to the ongoing insecurity, and that's since January 17th. And in Haiti, the UN resident and humanitarian coordinator Mamadou Diallo and the Prime Minister Jean-Henri Séan launched the 2019 Humanitarian Response Plan for Haiti. It seeks $126 million to provide critical humanitarian assistance and protection services to $1.3 million this year. And a couple of things I want to flag to you. A new website to increase transparency and accountability in the UN system. The Resident Coordinator Special Purpose Trust Fund web portal was launched this week, and it displays in real time the commitments, contributions, and expenditures recorded for the Special Purpose Trust Fund, which manages all of the financial transactions of the new Resident Coordinator system. The URL, if you're interested, is soc.un.org/SPTF. And in Geneva, the UN Road Safety Strategy was launched today. The strategy is based on an approach that manages the interaction between speed, road, and infrastructure and road user behavior to prevent crashes. Worldwide, road traffic crashes claim the lives of 1.35 million people every year. This means that more people die from road injuries than from HIV/AIDS, TB, diarrheal disease. And in the context of the UN operates over 25,000 vehicles around the world. Data shows that UN personnel are twice more likely to be killed by road traffic crashes than by a terrorist act, with an average of 12 staff members killed every year in road crashes. Here at 3 p.m. in Conference Room 3, there'll be an event on the new strategy, and that will be led by the Undersecretary General for Safety and Security, Peter Drennan, as well as the Secretary General Special Envoy for Road Safety, Jean Todt. And today we travel to the South Pacific, and we say thank you to the Marshall Islands for paying their budget dues in full, and that goes up. That honor roll goes up to 69. At 4:45 p.m. this afternoon, there will be a briefing here by Antonio Tajani, the President of the European Parliament, and that follows his meeting with the Secretary General. Then press conference tomorrow. France and the permanent representatives of France and Germany will be here to present the program for their twinned presidency, which will be March and April. So you will hear from Ambassador Delattre and Ambassador Husgen of Germany, and that will be 4 p.m. tomorrow. We will soon hear from Monica after you're done with me. And I wanted to flag one last important item. Today we join the Secretary General in wishing a very happy 100th birthday to Sir Brian Urquhart, the legendary longtime UN official. The Secretary General in a statement said that Sir Brian's imprint on the United Nations has been so profound as that of anyone in the organization's history. As one of the organization's earliest employees, he set the standard for international civil service, principled, dedicated, and impartial. Sir Brian's commitment to peace was forged in part during the Second World War, where he was among the Allied soldiers present shortly after the liberation of the Bergen-Belsen death camp. With warmth and generosity and encouragement, the Secretary General, Sir Brian, has been an inspirational figure for UN staff and countless young people as they pursued careers. As we mark this milestone, we are grateful for his brilliant and incomparable contribution as a stalwart servant of we, the people. We wish him a happy birthday. The message is available online. And now we turn to Majid.
Thank you, Stéphane. I have two questions. The first one on Syria. The Syrian government asking the refugees in the camps near Rukman and in those areas that are controlled by the U.S. to return to their home. I just want to understand what's the United Nations assessment about and message for the refugees in those camps. Is it safe for them to return?
I haven't seen the particular comments you're referring to. Our position, as we've been expressing it here for a couple of days on the specific camp, and also as a matter of policy, is any return of people to their homes, to refugees, should be voluntary, should be dignified, and should be done within the framework of international humanitarian
Is it safe
law.
for them to return?
That is not an assessment that we're able to make. Others at this point.
And my second question is is about the ISIS terrorist fighters, the foreign fighters in Iraq and Syria. The European countries seems to be reluctant or downright unwilling to accept their citizens back, that those citizens that committed heinous crimes against Iraqis and Syrians. They don't, and those countries, there's not much taking responsibility about their citizens' crime that are committed against civilians in my country, in Syria. What is the United Nations position about this? Do you think those countries should take back their own citizens?
I think this is obviously a very timely issue, also a very complex issue. The Security Council in 2017 passed Resolution 2396, which really is the best guidance and normative guidance on the issue of the return of foreign fighters to their homes. There obviously needs to be very strong human rights compliant policies how to deal with the returning fighters, and especially the children of foreign fighters and some of the women who went and followed their partners or husbands to the battlefield. Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah. Stéphane, on this India-Pakistan conflict, and the two questions. One is that the President of the United States, Trump, said it in his statement in Hanoi that he sees there's some positive signs between India and Pakistan. And then Pakistan's Prime Minister just decided to release the Indian pilot. So does the United Nations Secretary General see any positive sign?
Look, the reports of the promise of the release of the Indian pilot by the Pakistani authorities, I think, would be very much a welcomed step. We would encourage both parties to do whatever they can to de-escalate the situation, and this is the message that has been passed on by the United Nations and I think by the international community as a whole.
Yes, another thing, has the Secretary General himself has had any time to talk to the Indian Prime Minister or the Pakistani Prime Minister?
Contacts have been had with both sides at various levels. That's what I'm able to share with you at this point, Masood. Yeah.
Thank you. Please, I wanted to ask, does Secretary General have any comments on the Trump-Kim summit which happened?
Yes, of course. Secretary General has been was following closely the developments in Hanoi. I think he very much appreciates the effort that was made in those discussions, regardless of the results of the outcome that we saw. Courageous diplomacy, I think, has established the foundation to advance sustainable peace and the complete and verifiable denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And we all very much hope that these discussions will continue in that direction. Mr. Avni, and then Errol.
A few questions. First of all, to follow up on that, is he disappointed that there was no outcome that was in that summit?
I think no one, and that includes the Secretary General, ever thought that this process of engaging with the DPRK, as we've seen over the years, would be an easy one. So he's very grateful for the effort that was made, and he very much hopes that dialogue and discussions will continue.
Okay, a couple of other questions. One, there was a report issued today by the Human Rights Council on Gaza. Does the Secretary General support the report?
Not for him to. Secretary General is aware of the release. The report was It's from an independent commission, as mandated by the Human Rights Council, but it's not the Secretary General's report, and he's aware of its release.
No comment, though.
I have no further comment.
And
Let's
one
go for
last
3, Benny.
one.
Last
Yeah.
one, okay. I'll hold you to that, yeah.
I may have missed it, but has the Secretary General at any point made a comment on the attack in Argentina over the chief rabbi of Argentina?
No, not specific. I mean, we've seen the press reports, and I frankly I don't have enough background on the attack at this very moment. But I will get back to you. But obviously, we condemn any sort of violence. But I will get back to you something more precise. Errol.
Thank you, Steph.
Errol.
There is an effort in Bosnia and Herzegovina. President of the presidency, Mr. Milorad Dodik, created a special commission which is opposing actually the finding of the UN courts in Hague on happenings in Srebrenica, genocide in Srebrenica and the siege of Sarajevo. So I wonder what does the Secretary General says in general on that, and does he aware of that?
I have no doubt that he's aware, but however, I'm not aware, so let me try to get some information. Stefano.
Yes. Does the Secretary General had any contact with the representative there of Guaido? We can call it government, but Guaido.
The Secretary General wrote back to the President of National of the Assembly when he wrote to him, and contacts are had also at various levels.
But did his representative, I mean, of Guaido's here in this country, we know that there is an ambassador, for example, the President of the European Union. He said that he met him yesterday in Washington. Did these people that are in the United States did try to contact?
I'm not aware of whether or not they've tried. You'd have to ask them. But the Secretary General has not met that person. 1 second, because you said it was your last question, Arthur. Yeah, no. There was no. Go ahead.
Thank you, Stéphane. The UN mission to Libya put out a tweet. I think it was yesterday, that there had been a meeting between the two factions, the Prime Minister and the other faction in Libya, and that they had agreed that national elections are necessary. I think they said in the statement they also agreed on ways to maintain stability in the country and unify its institutions. And this meeting had taken place at the instigation of the Secretary General's special envoy to Libya. Do you have any details on from this meeting, and secondly, on the plan for elections?
No. What I can tell you is that discussions are ongoing in trying to get the various parties in Libya to agree on a conducive way forward for elections, but nothing to publicly announce at this point. Benny.
Just to try to realize what's going on in this afternoon's Security Council, one of the resolutions proposes that the Secretary General will use his good offices to facilitate a new election. Have the Americans who proposed this resolution contacted the Secretary General to see whether he can do it, and B, can he are his good offices available for?
Well, his good offices are always available, always open, as long as in any situation, as both parties or if it's multiple parties agree to it. I don't want to get ahead of the Security Council. Let's see what happens with the votes, as I understand it, and obviously the Secretary General will follow the instructions, if any are given to him by the Security Council.
The Americans contact him beforehand?
I'm not aware of any direct contact on this specific issue, but we talk to member states all the time.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Is there any report on the investigation of the killing of Venezuelan Indians last weekend and the incident? And also there is a report of killing of 80 indigenous by gold miners in Venezuela. 3 of them survivors. So that's the information. And is anything
I don't have any independent information on that. I think the Secretary General condemned very firmly the loss of life that we saw over the weekend, the use of lethal force. But I will try to get a bit more information on what you mentioned. Carla.
According to the Wall Street Journal, I believe it was Monday, the Venezuelan opposition is calling for military intervention. Saturday evening, no, I believe it was Monday. Also, the New York Times had a photograph of the opposition constructing Molotov cocktails. And as a follow-up, if there is a call for new elections in Venezuela, who can guarantee that they will be free and fair? According to Jimmy Carter, the fairest elections in the world were in Venezuela, and he very much questioned the legitimacy of U.S. elections. So,
we're getting those are all interesting questions for journalists and analysts to try to answer, but we're very much getting ahead of ourselves, and that's a lot of hypotheticals. The Secretary General's position continues to be the same, is that he thinks it is, he would encourage meaningful political negotiations. Errol.
Just since you mentioned the good offices of the UN, is now the good office of Mr. Matthew Nimitz closed?
I think you unfortunately missed a very interesting and pleasant briefing by Mr. Nimitz yesterday. He is wrapping up his work. As he said, I think his work here is done. If anybody deserves a break, it is Ambassador Nimitz, after his almost 3 decades of work on this issue. As he mentioned, there was, I think yesterday, there'd be a lot of residual issues. I mean, not issues, but residual things that need to happen. Logistically, change of names of plaques and all of that. But the process that he facilitated is coming to an end, and as is his tenure. Masoud, very soon, I think. Masoud, for him. Huh?
Yes, in case that there is a conversation between the Secretary General and the Prime Minister of India and Pakistan, will there be a readout from you either now, today, or tomorrow?
I will do my best, as I always do, to share as much information as humanly possible with you, Masoud, and with everybody else.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. Monica, this sounds like a great time for you to come up here.